She sat alone in the back of the classroom, her fingers tapping rhythmically on the desk, as if they were playing a song only she could hear. The other students were busy chatting or scrolling through their phones, completely uninterested in the girl sitting in the corner with her guitar case at her feet. Music was her escape, her safe space where she could express everything she felt but couldn't say aloud. She would often retreat to the quietest corner of the school or sit in her room at home, strumming her guitar and singing softly to herself. But today was different. Today, she had to face the loudest voices in her life, the ones who didn't understand her music. She had always been different from the others, not by choice, but because of her love for something that not everyone appreciated. Her music wasn't like the popular songs playing on the radio, or the ones that the crowd at school danced to. It was deep, personal, and raw, songs that spoke about real-life struggles, dreams, and emotions. Most of the time, she didn't mind being different, but today, she felt the weight of her uniqueness more than ever. Adam, a guy who seemed to have a knack for putting people down, had found a new target in her. He was the kind of person who thrived on making others feel small, especially when they dared to be themselves. It started with small comments, little jabs here and there about how her music was too loud or weird. But lately, his comments had gotten worse, and the mockery had become almost unbearable. He made fun of her during lunch breaks, calling her songs screeching and claiming they were just noise. His words echoed in her head, each one a reminder of how different she was. She didn't mind the whispering or the giggles from people she didn't know well, but when it came from someone like Adam, who was so confident and popular, it stung. It wasn't just Adam, though. The entire school seemed to turn a blind eye to her music. Most students didn't understand why she played the guitar the way she did, or why she always had a notebook full of lyrics she poured her heart into. To them, music was just background, noise, something to pass the time. But for her, it was more than that. It was her language, the one way she could share her soul without saying a word. It wasn't something she could explain easily, and she wasn't sure anyone would ever truly understand. The words Adam had thrown at her made her want to retreat into the shadows, to stop playing altogether. The idea of quitting had crossed her mind more than once. But there was always this voice inside her, small but strong, that urged her to keep going. It was her music, her story, and no one could take that away from her. Still, that didn't stop the doubt from creeping in. Maybe Adam was right. Maybe her music wasn't good enough. But then again, maybe it was exactly what the world needed. Something real. Something different. Sitting there, lost in thought, she knew something had to change. She couldn't let Adam's words define her, but the thought of standing up and confronting him was terrifying. How could she fight back against someone who seemed to have everything? The popularity, the attention, the confidence. She didn't have those things. She had her music, and sometimes that didn't feel like enough. But today was going to be different. Today, she would stop letting fear control her. She would stop letting the voices of others drown out her own. And more than anything, she would stop pretending to be something she wasn't just to fit in. Her music was her truth, and it deserved to be heard. She took a deep breath, standing up from the desk and picking up her guitar case. She didn't know what would happen next, but she was ready. Ready to prove to herself, and to Adam, that music wasn't just noise. It was her voice, and it was louder than anything anyone could say. The day of the talent show had arrived, and the school gymnasium was filled with excitement. The air was thick with the sounds of chatter and the nervous energy of students preparing for their performances. She sat quietly backstage, clutching her guitar case, feeling both a sense of nervousness and a strange sense of calm. It wasn't the kind of stage she was used to. This was big. There would be more people here than just a few curious classmates or a handful of teachers. There would be an audience, watching, listening, judging. The same people who had mocked her music, who had called her strange and unoriginal. Today, they would hear her play, and she was determined to show them who she really was. Her hands shook slightly as she adjusted her guitar strap, making sure everything was in place. The reality of what she was about to do started to hit her, and she wondered if she was making a huge mistake. What if they didn't get it? What if they laughed again? She knew this was a risk, but she also knew it was a risk she had to take. There was no turning back now. The MC's voice rang out over the loudspeakers, announcing the next performer. She took a deep breath and stepped onto the stage, the bright lights blinding her for a moment. The audience was a blur of faces, some familiar and some unfamiliar, but she could feel all their eyes on her. Her heart raced, and for a split second, she thought about turning around and walking off. But then she remembered why she was here. She wasn't just here to play music. She was here to show them who she was. She was here to prove that her voice mattered. She picked up her guitar, adjusting the mic stand in front of her. The room grew quiet as she strummed the first few notes of her song. The sound of the guitar filled the room, but it wasn't the kind of music that most people expected. It wasn't a catchy, easy-to-dance-to pop song. It was raw, heartfelt, and personal. Everything she had wanted to say, but couldn't find the words for. The melodies seemed to resonate with her emotions, flowing from her fingertips, as if the music was speaking for her. At first, the audience was still, unsure of what to make of it. She could feel the eyes on her, waiting for something to happen, waiting for the song to go somewhere familiar. But she kept playing, letting the music flow, pouring everything she had into every chord. She sang the lyrics softly at first, but as she continued, her voice grew stronger, more confident. She wasn't just singing anymore, she was telling her story. The song was about feeling misunderstood, about being judged for who you are, about standing up for yourself even when no one else believes in you. It was her truth, and she was finally letting it be heard. Slowly, the audience began to react. Some of the students shifted in their seats, leaning forward to listen more closely. A few whispered to each other, but this time, it wasn't in mockery. There was a sense of curiosity, maybe even respect in the air. She could see their faces change as the song went on. What started as confusion turned into admiration. She wasn't just playing music anymore, she was making them feel something. By the time she reached the final notes, the room was silent. Her hands trembled slightly as she finished the song, the last chord hanging in the air. She stood there, for a moment, waiting for the reaction, her heart in her throat. Then, slowly at first, the applause started. It wasn't loud at first, just a few scattered claps, but then it grew. More and more people joined in, clapping, cheering, and standing to their feet. The roar of approval filled the room, and for the first time that day, she felt like she belonged. She smiled, her heart swelling with pride. It wasn't about winning the talent show. It wasn't even about proving Adam wrong anymore. It was about finding her voice and sharing it with the world. About showing everyone that she was more than just the person they had judged her to be. The applause was the validation she didn't even know she needed. She had done it. She had taken the stage, sung her heart out, and shown everyone what her music was really about. And in that moment, she knew she would never let anyone silence her again. The days following her performance were a mix of emotions. The buzz around school had been non-stop. For the first time, people were looking at her differently. It wasn't the teasing glances or the whispers behind her back. It was something else, something she hadn't expected. People were talking about her music. She had become more than just a girl with a guitar. She had become someone they wanted to understand. Even Adam, who had been so quick to criticize her music, seemed to take notice. But as much as the newfound attention felt good, it also brought with it a sense of pressure. The applause, the compliments, the nods of approval. It was all overwhelming. People wanted more from her now. They wanted her to keep playing, keep singing, keep proving herself. And while she was happy to be heard, the weight of those expectations started to build. What if she couldn't meet them? What if the next song didn't sound as good? What if she couldn't live up to the praise she was receiving? She began to spend even more time with her guitar, writing new songs, but each new lyric felt like a test. She found herself looking for inspiration everywhere, during walks home, in conversations with her friends, even in the quiet moments when she was alone. But every time she tried to write something new, she couldn't shake the feeling that it had to be just as perfect as the last song. The pressure to write something that would live up to the hype was starting to take away the joy of creating. One afternoon, while sitting by the window, strumming her guitar, she realized something. She had spent so much time worrying about what others expected from her that she had almost forgotten why she started playing in the first place. She didn't pick up the guitar to impress anyone. She didn't start writing songs to be popular. She had done it because music made her feel alive, because it allowed her to express things that words alone could never capture. Her music was her own, and that's what made it special. It wasn't about pleasing anyone else. It was about being true to herself. It was then that she decided to take a step back. She stopped trying to write songs that others would love and started writing for herself again. She poured all her feelings into the music, not worrying about how it would be received. She wrote songs about things that truly mattered to her. Her dreams, her fears, the things she loved, and the things that scared her. The music started flowing freely again, without the pressure to perform or prove anything. And that was when she realized that the more honest her music was, the more it connected with people. It wasn't about perfection. It was about authenticity. But there was still one thing she hadn't done. She hadn't confronted Adam. Though she had found peace with her music, there was a lingering part of her that felt unsettled. Adam's words still echoed in her mind, and despite the success of her performance, she knew she couldn't move forward without addressing the hurt he had caused. She decided to approach him one afternoon after school, when the hallways were quiet and most students had already gone home. She found him leaning against the lockers, chatting with a group of friends. As she walked up to him, her heart beat faster, but she held her head high. Adam looked up, a surprised look crossing his face as she approached. Without wasting time, she spoke. "I just wanted to say something. You've made fun of my music before, and I know you didn't mean to hurt me, but it did. It really did. I just want you to understand that music is how I express myself. It's personal, and when you mocked it, you made me feel like I didn't belong." Adam stood there, silent for a moment, his friends quieting down as they noticed the tension. Finally, he spoke. "I didn't realize it affected you that way. I was just messing around, but I'm sorry. I guess I never thought about how personal your music is." It wasn't an apology she had expected, but it was enough. It wasn't about forgiveness or moving past the hurt. It was about him understanding. And for the first time, she felt like she could finally let go of the weight of his words. She smiled, feeling a sense of closure she didn't realize she needed. "Thanks," she said before walking away. As she left the hallway, she realized she had taken a huge step, not just in standing up for herself, but in owning her music in a way she never had before. She wasn't just playing for an audience anymore, she was playing for herself. And that, she realized, was the greatest gift she could ever give. The day of the talent show had finally arrived, and the nerves that had been building up for weeks were starting to catch up with her. She could barely focus on anything else. The halls of the school were filled with excited chatter, students running around and trying to gather last-minute things for their performances. It was hard to concentrate, especially with the noise and the constant stream of students talking about what they were going to do on stage. She sat quietly in the backstage area, her guitar case sitting next to her on the floor. Her fingers kept playing absent chords on her knee as she stared at the floor, lost in thought. Her mind kept running through different scenarios. What if she forgot the lyrics? What if she didn't play well enough? What if everyone started laughing at her? She had played in front of small groups before, but nothing compared to this. There would be an entire auditorium watching her. The idea of it made her stomach churn. She wasn't used to all this attention. The last few days had been overwhelming, to say the least. The compliment, the congratulations, and the people who had come up to her after her last performance all felt like a dream. She had never been the center of attention before, and even though it was nice to hear positive feedback, A part of her wondered if she was just an ordinary girl who had gotten lucky. She didn't want to disappoint them. Her thoughts were interrupted by the loudspeaker announcing that the show would begin soon. The MC's voice echoed down the hall, causing her to jump a little. She could hear the excitement building in the auditorium, the crowd slowly gathering and settling in for what was about to happen. Her name was called, and for a brief moment, everything went still. She stood up, feeling her knees tremble slightly as she lifted her guitar case. She knew this was her moment, the chance to prove to herself and everyone else that her music mattered. Taking a deep breath, she stepped onto the stage. The bright lights hit her instantly, blinding her for a second. As she adjusted her eyes, she couldn't see much of the crowd, but she could feel their presence. Thousands of eyes watching her every move. The nerves hit her all over again. For a split second, she almost considered turning around and walking off the stage. But something inside her stopped her. She had come this far, and there was no going back now. She placed the guitar on her lap and adjusted the mic in front of her. It was time. As she strummed the first few chords, the sound of the guitar echoed through the gymnasium. At first, the room was quiet, almost too quiet. She could hear the soft shuffle of feet and the sound of a few people clearing their throats. But there was no laughter, no mocking, just silence. She took that as a good sign. She could feel the music flow through her hands, and the nervousness that had consumed her moments before began to fade. When she began to sing, her voice was a little shaky at first, but as she went on, she grew more confident. The words she had written, the ones that had come from her heart, flowed naturally. She didn't care anymore whether they liked it or not. She just wanted to share it with them. This was her story, her truth. The song was slow at first, but then it started to build, the music swelling as she played with more intensity. She felt the rhythm carry her through, and with every strum of the guitar, she could feel her connection to the audience growing. She had never experienced anything like it before. As the song came to an end, there was a brief silence. She held her breath, waiting for the response. Then slowly, the applause began. It was soft at first, a few claps here and there, but then it grew. More people joined in, and soon the whole auditorium was clapping and cheering. She felt her heart race as the crowd's support washed over her. She smiled to herself, her hands still gripping the guitar as she took a small bow. She couldn't believe it. She had done it. She hadn't just survived the performance, she had thrived. In that moment, she knew that this was what she was meant to do. The audience didn't just hear her music, they felt it. They saw her for who she truly was. And that was enough. She walked off the stage, her heart still pounding. But this time, it was with pride. She had found something she hadn't expected, a voice that could not be ignored. And from now on, she would never let fear silence it again. The days following the talent show were filled with mixed emotions. At first, she didn't know what to make of it all. People were talking about her, complimenting her music, and giving her the attention she had never received before. It felt strange. She had always been the quiet girl who kept to herself, never the center of attention. Now, everyone seemed to want to talk to her, ask her about her music, and even tell her how much they had enjoyed her performance. It felt nice, but at the same time, it made her uneasy. She hadn't expected the praise to come so quickly. She had never done anything like this before, standing up in front of a crowd, playing her music, and singing her heart out. The applause felt like a dream. The nerves she had felt before taking the stage had quickly turned into something more, something like pride. She had done it. She had taken a risk, and it had paid off. But even with all the compliments, there was a part of her that wasn't sure she could keep it up. What if the next song wasn't as good? What if the next performance wasn't as well received? What if they forgot about her? The pressure was starting to build again. She began thinking that she needed to keep proving herself, that she needed to write more songs, perform more often, and always be better than before. It felt like a never-ending cycle. The more attention she got, the more she worried about living up to everyone's expectations. Her music, which had once been a source of comfort, was now starting to feel like a weight she had to carry. She spent hours every day writing new songs, trying to come up with something that could match her last performance. But no matter what she wrote, it didn't feel right. The lyrics didn't flow the same way, and the melodies didn't sound as powerful. She felt stuck, trapped by her own success. The more she tried, the harder it became. She began to question if this was even what she wanted anymore. Was she doing this for herself, or was she just trying to keep the attention on her? One evening, after spending hours trying to write something new, she sat back and took a deep breath. She stared at her guitar, her fingers resting on the strings but not playing anything. That's when it hit her. She had gotten so caught up in trying to live up to everyone's expectations that she had forgotten why she started playing music in the first place. It wasn't for the praise. It wasn't to impress anyone. It was because music made her feel alive. Music was how she expressed herself, how she told her story. She realized that she had been so focused on performing for others that she had lost touch with the reason she picked up the guitar in the first place. She had played her first song because it felt good to let her feelings out. She had played because it was a way to connect with the world, to say things that words alone couldn't express. Somewhere along the way, she had started to think that her music had to be perfect, that it had to be something everyone else would like. But that wasn't the point, so she decided to take a step back. She stopped worrying about what people would think. She began writing again, but this time she wrote for herself. She poured her feelings into every lyric, every note. There was no pressure to make it sound perfect, no need to worry about how it would be received. She just played, and when she did, she felt free again. The music started to flow naturally, without the weight of expectations holding her back. The more she played, the more she remembered why she loved it in the first place. It wasn't about pleasing others. It was about expressing herself. And when she played, she could feel the music fill her heart. And for the first time in a long while, she didn't care if anyone was listening. She was doing this for herself. That's when she realized something important. The more authentic her music was, the more it connected with people. They didn't want to hear a perfect song. They wanted to hear something real. And by being true to herself, she was finally able to share her music in a way that made her feel complete. It wasn't about fame or attention. It was about sharing her truth and letting others connect with it. She had found her voice again, and that was all that mattered. After her realization, things started to change. She no longer felt the same pressure to perform or create for others. Her music had once again become her escape, her safe place where she could express herself freely without worrying about how it would be judged. And yet, there was still something missing. She had let go of the pressure from the outside world, but there was still one thing left. Adam. Though she had found peace within herself, the words he had said to her earlier still lingered in her mind. It wasn't about the performance anymore. It wasn't even about the applause. It was about the fact that he had made her feel small for so long. She had pushed through it and found her voice again. But something inside her knew that she had to address it. She couldn't move forward without confronting the person who had made her feel like she didn't belong. She had spent so much time thinking about what she could say to him, how she could confront him without being angry or bitter. She had learned that holding on to resentment only weighed her down, so she wanted to do this in a way that would allow her to let go of that anger once and for all. It wasn't about getting revenge or making him feel guilty. It was about finding closure and moving on. So, one afternoon, she decided to find him. She had heard that he was hanging out by the lockers after school like he always did. She wasn't sure what to expect, but she knew she had to do this for herself. It wasn't going to be easy, but it would be worth it. When she finally saw Him, standing there with his friends. She hesitated. It felt like everything inside her was telling her to turn around and walk away. But she knew she couldn't. Taking a deep breath, she walked up to him. His friends went quiet when they saw her approach. Adam looked at her, a hint of confusion on his face. "I just wanted to talk to you for a second," she said, her voice steady but quiet. He looked a little surprised, but he didn't back away. "Yeah, sure. What's up?" "I've been thinking about the things you said to me," she started, her heart beating a little faster. "The things you said about my music, how you called it noise, and how you made fun of it. It really hurt, more than you probably realized, and I just wanted you to know that." She paused for a moment, watching him closely. He was quiet, looking at the ground for a second, and then back at her. "I never meant to hurt you," he said finally, his voice softer than she expected. "I was just joking around. I didn't think it would affect you like that." She nodded, taking in his words. "I know you probably didn't mean it, but it did. And I think it's important that you understand why. Music is really personal to me. It's how I express everything that I'm feeling. And when you mocked it, it made me feel like I was doing something wrong, like I wasn't good enough." For a moment, they both stood there in silence, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Adam's friends watched them from a distance, but no one said anything. It felt like time had stopped for a second. Finally, Adam spoke again. "I'm sorry," he said, looking up at her with sincerity in his eyes. "I didn't realize. I was just being stupid. I get it now." She felt a sense of relief wash over her. It wasn't about making him feel guilty. It was about letting go of the anger and the hurt she had been carrying. She smiled softly, feeling the weight lift off her shoulders. "Thank you," she said. "I appreciate it. I just needed you to understand." With that, she turned and walked away, feeling lighter than she had in a long time. As she left the hallway, she realized something important. Sometimes, the hardest part of moving on wasn't about changing other people's opinions. It was about letting go of the hurt and finding peace within yourself. From that moment on, she knew that her music would always be hers, and she didn't need anyone's approval to keep playing. Adam's apology had given her the final piece of closure she needed. She was no longer holding on to the past. She was free to move forward, knowing that the music she created came from her heart. And that was all that mattered. The days that followed felt different, lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. The tension she had carried for so long seemed to disappear. For the first time in a while, she wasn't just playing music for the sake of others. She was playing for herself. She realized that she had finally come to terms with her journey, with her voice, and with her music. It wasn't about what other people thought anymore. It was about sharing her truth and being authentic. But it wasn't just the apology from Adam that had changed things. It was the way she had come to understand herself more deeply. Her music, once filled with doubt and insecurity, now flowed with confidence. She no longer feared being judged for the things she wrote or the way she played. The sound of her guitar didn't feel like something she had to perfect. It felt like the most natural extension of herself. She started performing again, but this time, something was different. She wasn't worried about the applause or whether anyone would like what she played. She didn't feel the need to impress anyone. The more she performed, the more she felt a connection to the people who listened to her. It was as if her music reached them in a way that words couldn't. She wasn't trying to be something she wasn't anymore. She was just being herself, and that felt freeing. The more she played, the more people began to notice. But this time, it wasn't the mocking or the criticism that she had feared before. Instead, people started approaching her with respect, wanting to know more about her music, about the stories behind the songs. They asked about the inspiration for her lyrics, the emotions she poured into every note. She was no longer just the quiet girl with a guitar. She had become someone people wanted to hear, someone whose voice mattered. At one of her performances, a small group of students gathered after the show, telling her how much they related to her songs. They shared their own stories, stories of feeling out of place, of being misunderstood, and of finding solace in music. It was in that moment that she realized just how powerful her voice had become. It wasn't just a way for her to express herself, it was a way for others to find comfort too. Her music had become a bridge between her and the people around her, and she had never felt more connected to those who listened. She began writing more, but now each song felt like a conversation. She no longer hesitated or second-guessed herself. She wrote about everything: her fears, her hopes, her dreams. She wrote about the struggles she had faced and the triumphs she had experienced. Each song was a piece of her, a chapter in the story she was telling the world. And the more she shared, the more she realized that her music wasn't just for her, it was for everyone who needed to hear it. Her confidence grew, not because she had become popular, but because she had learned to trust herself. She knew that her music mattered, not because of how others viewed it, but because it was her truth. And that truth was something that no one could take away from her. Looking back, she realized that the journey had not been easy. There had been moments of doubt, moments when she wanted to quit, and moments when she questioned her worth. But through it all, her music had been her constant, her anchor. It had carried her through the tough times and had brought her closer to who she truly was. And now, she knew that no matter where her music took her, she would always be grounded in the truth of who she was. The applause, the compliments, and the recognition were all nice, but they didn't define her. What mattered most was that she had found her voice. She had learned that it wasn't about proving herself to anyone else. It was about being true to herself, letting her music speak for her, and knowing that it would always be enough. She had come full circle, from the girl who was afraid to play in front of others to the woman who stood confidently on stage, knowing that